We're streaming to Finland, and we're ready to go. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our 5th Think Circle. I'm Thomasine Kamerling, Executive Vice President, Sustainability and Communications for Huhtamaki, and welcome to this Think Circle that we're streaming live from Bandra, Mumbai, India. It is our first in India, and hopefully not our last one. So perhaps before we call the panelists up, just a couple of words of Think Circle and why this is important. We created this concept as a platform for dialogue. As a global provider in sustainable packaging solutions, we see that obviously packaging plays an enormous role in addressing food waste. Food waste in of itself creates 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So we know that we have a role to play in that, but increasingly we've realized that it's not just good enough to make sure our products are recyclable. They need to be recycled. So today we're really talking about how we redefine recycling schemes through value chain innovation. And this is where the Think Circle concept comes in. We believe that the only way to make a step forward towards closing the loop towards greater circularity is actually working with all the stakeholders across the value chain. No one person, no one entity holds all of the answers. And so it's really important to us to have that conversation both across our customers, our suppliers, academia, NGOs, and so forth. So welcome to this really important subject today and to what I hope will be a great Think Circle. I think before I kick off a little bit more, a couple of housekeeping things. So to all of you here with me this afternoon, and you're warm welcome. We have a roving mic, so halfway through we'll open for questions from the floor. I also have, as you can see, my trusty iPad, because we'll also be fielding questions from people who are joining us online. That was the first question. It actually went bing. And we have people watching us from all over the world. This is something that we've done a number of times. And again, with a purpose of really starting to shift forward that conversation and working together across the industry, across society to find a solution for this. So with that, and without further ado, let me introduce our first panelist, who's the CEO and co-founder of RECITY Network, Mr. Suraj Nonakar. Suraj shares a deep interest, please start joining me. Suraj shares a deep interest in transforming cities and its dynamic with waste, especially plastics. RECITY's purpose is to keep plastics in the economy and out of the environment, and RECITY has delivered impact through integrated circular waste management projects across 15 plus cities in India by strategically fostering cross-value chain collaborations. So a huge welcome to Suraj. Our second panelist today is Mr. Marco Hilty. Please, Marco. He's the president of the flexible packaging segment at Huhtamaki. Huhtamaki has 17 units in India, of which 16 are for flexible packaging manufacturing. So it's one of our key markets. So huge welcome to Marco, and I now move away. Our next panelist is Mr. Yogesh Bambal. He's the group leader of AMEA for Mondelez India. All of you in the room will know how big Mondelez India is. And it has, I think for 75 years, it has made making in India its key purpose, with iconic brands such as Cadbury and Oreos, which has been chosen by millions of consumers and Indian families. So big welcome to Yogesh. And last and certainly not least, a warm welcome to Dr. Rangaprasad. I apologize if I mispronounce the names, but I will do my best, who's the business head at Packaging 360, which is a comprehensive knowledge-sharing ecosystem for the Indian packaging industry. He has a background in chemical technologist by training, having earned his PhD at UDCT, which I believe is now known as ICT. Warm welcome. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, so we have a raft of questions here. Some of them are pre-prepared and some of them are not. Beware, beware. But perhaps, Suraj, if I can start with you. You joined RECITY, or you created it 7 years ago. How important is it for us to be able to find solutions to work with entities like it, and what role can they play? It is.
So the foundation of why organizations like RECITY exist is it's based on the fact that we need to arrest plastic pollution in cities. Mm-hmm. We need to improve the efficiency of plastic recovery from cities. It's because you understand how collection and aggregation systems work. And thirdly, it's foundationally to help brands to increase the recyclable content in packaging. Now, these three foundational things cannot be built by one organization. The intent of RECITY is to maximize the circularity of plastics in cities. And this happens by when you develop an ecosystem of change. RECITY fundamentally works as a catalyst that brings together brand owners, mm-hmm. the city government, the local citizens, the marginalized waste workers, all sanitary, contractual, informal, and the larger ecosystem to understand the value of creating this together. The beauty about plastics is the only tool that we have that solves an environmental problem and also a poverty issue in the country. It's a very beautiful tool that we have. If we use it effectively, organizations like ours play the role of actually bringing that change at the ground level. And that's the role that we play.
And thank you, Suraj, because I think you've raised a really important point, which is plastics is not just a negative, it's something that's extraordinarily useful. And I think with that, if I can turn to you, Marco, because obviously Flexibles business is plastics driven. How do you balance that with actually the sustainability journey that, for example, Huhtamaki is on?
Thank you. I'm really glad, Suraj, you put that into perspective and balanced the pros and cons. I think just to throw out a few facts up front. So 44% of all waste is food-related waste. A third of all food gets wasted. From the total greenhouse gas emissions of food, plastics, or packaging, is 5%. So, and in addition to that, there's 135 million people in this world still living in poverty. So, what that means to me is we cannot compromise on the performance of packaging, because then the system would suffer much more. That doesn't mean we're off the hook. I think there's a lot we have to do. And for me, it starts with making our packaging recyclable. Today, that's not given. And I don't know if, in terms of, I don't want to go into technical details, but an optimal solution, the best solution today, high-performing solution of flexible packaging consists different materials, which doesn't make it recyclable. So we put now a lot of effort to make monomaterials with the adequate performance so that we don't risk the food. But then also we need to close the loop in terms of circularity, and we need to find a way to take back the waste into our production so that we can create that market you were talking about, Suraj.
And I think, so both of you raised two already really important points that we need to delve into a little bit more. One is around the value of plastics, and then you brought up the whole recycling piece and making it a secondary waste, waste as a secondary resource material. But I think perhaps before we get there, let's look a little bit at about the demand. So Yogesh, how do you manage consumer demand versus the drive for less packaging or, again, sustainability?
Yeah. First of all, let me thank everyone for inviting me here. So it's a pleasure to share my thoughts on sustainability. So of course, it's a very key topic which is being discussed all across the world. And considering the brand owner, what the role which we play, and then we have a challenge to manage the expectations in terms of the sustainability as well as the consumer needs, right? So as a Mondelez, of course, our statement is snacking made right? So we ensure that whatever changes which we do into the packaging is considering the consumer-inspired quality theme. So whatever the changes which we are focusing, we do a lot of research, we do a lot of validations, we test the certain changes on the packaging with the consumers and marketing and consumer insights team before we take a bigger call. So any changes, so as a Mondelez, we have a mission to make our packaging 100% recyclable by 2025, right? So it's a big ambition, and we are progressing very well on that journey. So less packaging doesn't mean that you need to just cut everything and share and produce the packages what is being expected. So you need to apply your thoughts, you need to apply the design principles smartly. So for example, the example which I can share here is very well, I think we have executed in the UK. So buttons, Cadbury Buttons brand. So what we have done smartly is we have reduced down the void spaces in the pouches, right? And then branded with the 15% less packaging. So product contains the same, but packaging waste is getting reduced. So how smartly you brand that change, that is very, very important. And another changes which we have done, like optimizing the unnecessary packaging layers, right? Which is causing a burden on the packaging system, right? And make our packaging designed to transport efficient packaging. So not necessarily only the primary packaging changes, maybe a secondary and tertiary packaging, which can unlock the efficiencies in the supply chain. So these are the changes which we can focus on in the whole design journey when we talk about sustainability. And as a first pillar of Mondelez, making 2025 recyclable packaging, less packaging is the first pillar and the framework which we are working upon. So it's very important how you make those changes and then how you smartly put it and convey that message to the consumers, saying that there is no compromise on the quality, there is no compromise on the food safety, and this is what we are doing for the planet. Yeah. So this is a very good example which I can cite. And I'm proudly saying that in India, we recently transitioned all our chocolate packaging to a recyclable packaging. So earlier it was a complex structures, and Huhtamaki has played a vital role in this transition. So really proud, and all our packaging, almost 98% of packaging in India is recyclable packaging. So this kind of thoughts goes into when you design packaging in context to the sustainability.
So, and thank you for that. So we're there, so we've got smart packaging, we've got less packaging, and we're having design for circularity. So that leads me very nicely to Dr. Rangaprasad. So what else do we need to redefine the recycle schemes in addition to what we've talked about? So you've got the design piece. What else could we add to the table?
See, one of the things that we've been tracking all along is that all the supply chain holders or stakeholders in the supply chain are increasingly concerned about the quantum of packaging waste that is being generated. Yeah. So it's important to realize that on the one hand, polymer raw material producers are increasing their capacity, converters are increasing their production conversion capacity. So what you need is a very robust recycling system downstream. And that is possible only when brand owners and the other supply chain partners collaborate in designing a recycling system which is technology oriented. So far, the recycling systems that have been prevalent in India are all in the localized or in the informal sector, mainly using manual labor and more of a social enterprise. But today we find that many of the polymer raw material suppliers, in collaboration with their converters and also the brand owners, are stepping up or scaling up. Yep. Because of the anticipated increase in the quantum of plastics which will be converted not only into rigid but also flexible formats. So this is the trend that we have been seeing. So right now we find in India, recycling industry is almost gaining the status of an industry. It's becoming extremely technology oriented, and you have the support engineering functions like artificial intelligence, sorting systems which are now coming in. And in fact, many of the pilot projects are going on in different cities. So you'll find that change is happening, and you'll see totally in another maybe 5 to 10 years time, you'll see the industry will work towards completing that circularity loop. Yeah. So you'll no longer, plastics will no longer be the villain of the piece, so to say. Yep. So I think the trend is positive, and in fact, all the stakeholders are intensifying their efforts in this direction.
And your time prediction was 10 to 15 years?
I think yes, 10 years. And the other thing that will have to go in parallel is the behavioral change, because consumer habits can't be changed overnight. It has to happen, maybe if you are talking in terms in 2022, maybe by 2030, school curriculum should be, these kind of things should be encouraged. In fact, there are a lot of projects going on in Mumbai where, every weekend there are organizations which go to schools, they organize kind of orientation programs, which will help you to bring about that change. How to identify materials of use in everyday life, how to use them and how to dispose them. It's happening at the school level, it's happening at the community level, and how to distinguish, sort of packaging waste, electronic waste. You'll find in our own setup, in our own building, for example, there is a camp held every 3 months, wherein you can there is a truck which comes in and you can put all your electronic waste, including old laptops, mobile phones, chargers, all those kind of things. So a similar kind of exercise will have to be, or is being tried out on a pilot scale in many cities in India.
And I think this is the interesting point, because you talked to sort of 10, 15 years, you have a 2025 agenda, we have or Huhtamaki has a 2030 ambition, and you're doing things live in cities today. So somewhere there's how we will get there. You're talking about waste management, so the design for circularity and so forth, and the actual waste management. How do you move it, and what are you learning from cities in terms of how you shift it from a pilot scheme to actually something that's got scale? Suraj, sorry.
I'll very clearly speak about my mistakes. Okay, so we started with behavioral change, like Sir said, and we went to cities. And I'm an architect and urban planner by profession. I work in the plastic sector and look at cities very specifically as animals that are so complex. So when you go to cities, the administration sometimes is challenged with expertise. So there is waste everywhere, but there is no space for waste. So we started with a land use plan, saying that this is a dedicated space for waste and something will come up here. As we started building that premise, there was no bylaw which said that waste is even incorporated. When you build a building, there is not a single mention of waste in the building bylaws. So how will a city proactively create waste infrastructure in its own premise? Then next came that, okay, we have all this in place, we will do the behavioral change. We did behavioral change, but we realized that we don't have collection. Now, any amount of behavioral change without predictable collection systems, you will end up seeing waste on the streets. I mean, any amount of knowledge that you have, however educated you are, after 15 days, you are tired. What would you go and do? You would pick up a bag and go and dump it into a community bin. What would happen at a community bin? There would be stray animals taking that material away and making a mess out of it. It's very unfortunate for the stray animals and also for us that we don't have a collection system. So we said, how do we even compute collection systems? How do you even tabulate how many houses require a vehicle? So we started realizing, we took a specification of a vehicle, so it collects 450 kilograms of waste, mixed waste in one trip. So we did the waste characterization, understood one household generates in the ballpark of 1 kilogram of waste, and each individual does 368 grams of total of mixed waste, of which 8% is plastics, and there is 40%, it differs from city to city. So we started understanding the science behind waste, is because nobody had investigated it. And what we realized, that there are so many cities within cities. What works in the market does not work in residential areas. What works in religious precincts does not work in hospitals. What works in hotels does not work in offices. How do you tackle this monster called as a city? Because the frequency of collection expected in a household is very different to a school and very different to a hotel, that when people come and visit your hotel, they come at 7 o'clock and they finish up business by 11. So how do you tackle so many parameters of collection? Because if you lose it, you're losing good quality resource to a mixed container called as the community bin. That's when we realized, all this happened. And they say that, you can do all this science, but where's the business in this? It's in India, nobody works if there's no money on the table, right? Because everybody asks, what's in it for me? So we asked the waste worker, who was happily collecting mixed waste from the houses and dumping it into a community bin or a vehicle, said, I would need you to segregate 4 ways now. He said, why? Why should I participate in this? That's when we started that, a city of 5 lakh or a 500,000 population is generally managed by 500 to 700 waste workers, sanitary waste workers. And if you focus on those specific cadre of clean agents, you have the capability to completely transform the city's waste management system. And if you add the scientific layers to it, it actually makes sense. That's when we said that what is the one element that actually can create a value? And that's where, besides the metals and other things, plastics became of value. Now, how do you create value for plastics if there is no infrastructure? So we said we need a material recovery facility in which we can sort material. Now, on what premise do you sort? is because recyclers have specific specifications. If you don't deliver it to that, then the sorting does not add value and we can't give money back to incentivize the collection stuff. And that's where we integrated with the recyclers and said, if we went to the converters, the margins are a little bit better. So how do I create an additional revenue of 3 rupees per kg? And that power of 3 rupees is what will transform the country. Today, we don't have that value in the system for which we can't answer the most pressing question, what's in it for me? And if you get reminded every day at your doorbell that please segregate waste, it will transform the countries, because what's in it for me is the question that you will also ask yourself. And I think that's pretty much the play of connecting the dots across 15 cities, north, south, east, west, is what we've learned. And that's why waste management becomes very critical for recycling, because the feedstock is directly equivalent to the quality of recyclate that you would get. Mm-hmm. So I think the city systems need to be augmented to improve the recycling efficiency in the country. And that's my derivative.
I'm going to try and unpack some of the pieces in there, because there was a lot there, which is wonderful. Thank you for that. So let me see. So one is you have to work across the cities and you need to create holistic systems. The second one that I heard as well is how do you create value in the system? And I think, and perhaps, and gentlemen disagree with me if you will, but I think we are moving towards realizing that waste is a very valuable secondary resource material, particularly when it is not renewable. But how you address that and how you look at that becomes really, really challenging. So I'm going to move to you, Marco, because Huhtamaki launched a recycling pilot yesterday, which starts looking about recycling and creating value out of this. What was the mindset that set that up, and how do you see that giving value to waste and helping address this point?
So the recycling facility was set up by the Huhtamaki Foundation. Sunil and Maulik are two of the key drivers here who made that happen. So kudos to you. It's really a tremendous investment also, and a charitable investment. And what it does is it takes back consumer packaging waste, flexible packaging waste, tries to sort as good as possible, cleans it, and it at the end produces pellets which can be used downstream for other applications. They create flower pots with it. They can increase like up to 25% content they can use from this granulate. Now, this is a fantastic start, because it goes really to the consumer and collects consumer waste out of rivers, etc. I think where we can do a better job in our industry is we can increase the value of the waste by being monomaterial, so that it can really be reused without a lot of additional incremental costs in the recycling process. So we need to work on that, and then we need to use as much as possible existing recycling streams by producing with monomaterials where there's already an outlay or an infrastructure there, because it's very difficult to raise all that money to create new streams from scratch, and it takes time, as you highlighted. So we wanted to learn from that recycling facility to how can we separate better. Now we need to work with an organization like yours in order to get the source material, and then see how we get to the most pure material where there's a value associated to it. Of course, the objective is to use that around the world, but I'm really happy we started in India with this. This is our very first one. On the innovation side, we had yesterday also a meeting with the innovation team. What we want to do, what we imagine a future where all flexible packaging is monomaterial of a kind which has already an established recycling stream and has the right barrier and the right properties in order to protect the food, which is the most precious thing to do anyway. So that's what we're working on, and there's a lot of exciting things are going on there. And it's predominantly driven by our Indian team, because there are a few things unique here. One is the temperature, the humidity is different, so you need, in general, more protection than, for example, in Germany. And then the other thing is, in order for the product to get to the consumer, in terms of affordability, we need a lot of small packaging, And also it needs to be very cost competitive. So we start the design of our innovation from that premise. We want to deliver products which are recyclable, but at a similar cost point so that it's affordable.
I think that was the answer. So I've been getting some questions from our online teams or people watching this as well. So there's one which is very specific, and a couple of you have already highlighted where India is somewhat different. One of it is also in terms of people with more consumer power as well, but also how you bring value in. So what is it that we can learn about India and the paradigm that is India that is helpful for others as well, in terms of, because I think there's a speed that we need to advocate for and embrace in India to get it right more quickly here. What lessons could we learn? Perhaps I'll start with you, Dr. Rangaprasad.
Yeah. See, one of the things that you must appreciate that by our cultural habits are quite different from those in Europe or in North America. We are very conscious about what we purchase, how we use it, and you know, a typical Indian housewife will always look for a reuse value. Supposing you get a glass container, in the earlier days, let's say in the 1970s, we used to get our Bonvita in glass bottles. So that would not leave the house, you know, it would not be discarded.
Okay.
She would find some way of using it in the kitchen for storing pickles or some kind of, you know, it's a very highly India-centric kind of, you know, thought process. So we have transcended that stage now, and by virtue of this cultural or social habit, recycling is probably a well-established industry, so to speak, although it may not be technologically very advanced compared to other countries, but still you will find everything from even PVC, just about 10 kilometers away from here, not even 10, 5 kilometers away from this place. You will find one of the best PVC recycling facilities. You will be amazed at the way Hawaii chappals are fed into a machine and you get powder, PVC powder. So that's the level, you know, it's been going on. It's a kind of an ancestral business. People are well versed with it. They may not understand the full form of PVC or what kind of additives went into it, but they know for sure from hands-on work, how do we collect, sort, and then reprocess it for a different application. The same goes for bottles, which are either PET based. In fact, you will also be surprised that in India, the recycling rate of PET is probably the highest in the world, more than 95% of PET bottles.
Because the value again.
Yes, the value because of the bottle, the rigid packaging. The labor that is involved in collection gets amply rewarded.
Yeah.
But the same is not true for sachets and other flexible formats, because a couple of years ago, the Indian Institute of Packaging in Mumbai did a comprehensive survey of 4 major cities. And they found that there was hardly any monetary value for a person. Earlier days, they used to use a derogatory term called rack pickers, but today they are called environmental warriors.
And this is the point that Suraj was
environmental
making.
workers.
Yeah.
In a city like Mumbai, in South Mumbai, for example, a boy who's involved in this waste collection has to bend at least 200 times in a day. So he will not bend, strain his back at the end of the day for collecting sachets and those kind of, which have no monetary value. But bottles, yes. Okay. There is an economic value. So, and these are all daily wage earners. So probably they get something like, 30 to 40 rupees a day to make a living. That has to change. If you're talking about, a behavioral change, it has to happen. You have to bring those people and it has to be inclusive. One end, I'm talking about the recycling industry, which has to go technology, which has to become technology savvy. On the other hand, the social impact of this circularity, which is, I'm referring to all that is happening in India, so that, this can become a very vibrant industry. So it employs at the community level workers, and they are amply rewarded. So they can be brought into this system for collecting. They are skilled hands, they are trained eyes, they can differentiate. You'll be surprised, a couple of years when we did this study, a worker can tell you the difference between nylon and PET. And they're not polymer technologists. They can also tell you the difference between polyethylene and PET and polyethylene and PVC. So they know how to segregate different categories of plastic. So this abundance of knowledge is available in that informal sector. So you have to bring those people into the mainstream, train them so that whatever the other gentleman referred to as, collection, sorting, and then bringing a quality which is acceptable for inclusion back into the production stage, or let's say, as the purists would call it, downscaling to secondary application, non-food contact or non-packaging applications. So all these are going on in parallel, and I think this is the way it should, with a lot of support from brand owners and other supply chain partners. It is kicking off in a big way.
Okay. Yogesh, do you want to comment on that from your perspective as a brand owner? Indeed, how do you see that shift and what is necessary towards it?
Certainly. So basically, whatever Suraj, Marco, and Dr. Rangaprasad talked about, of course, we can't do it alone. We need to do it together, right? And everybody has to take a step, and it starts from us, right? So basically, from a brand owner perspective, what brand owners have decided to do as per their strategies, we will make all our packaging recyclable. But end of the day, if it is not systematically collected, sorted, and converted into a worth, it is not going to add any value. So that's where I think we need to educate within this whole value chain, and at the same time, the EPR, extended producers responsibility, all these regulation frameworks, all those things needs to be advocated properly in this whole value chain. Everybody has to take the leadership and drive that change fully. And at the same time, if you convert all our packaging material and reuse and recycle, then only the circularity will get completed.
Okay.
So end of the day, I think a lot of knowledge is required to educate people in this value chain. At the same time, we need to educate our consumers as well, right? And one of the way to educate our consumers is package labeling, right? Our packages are giving those directions to our recyclers or our collection systems or sorting mechanisms. Currently, what Doctor said about the collection mechanism, it's well settled, but in terms of the unorganized way, I mean, even if you don't know the knowledge of packaging, people are expert enough to identify what is PET, what is PP. So that kind of level of labeling norms, if we can create, or regulations which we can create, will help all our recycling streams to segregate those waste efficiently and effectively. So that is my point of view. So a lot of work needs to be done on package labeling as well, and forming those regulations for the recycling. I mean, there is another way of doing the recycling. Like mechanical recycling is very well known, but there is an advanced chemical recycling process as well. And how you get all the packaging waste back into the value chain without generating the other carbon emissions. So you need to see the life cycle analysis end to end. And we need to focus as we progress on these advanced technologies of recycling as well, and contribute our best.
Okay. I think there's 2 points that you said, and one is reflected in a question that I got here from the Rubbish Project, which talks about the value of data capture. You touched on actually understanding the dynamics of the sector, and I think all of you have as well, as sort of the analysis, and they saying, does the introduction of smart digital supply chain tracking, is that going to be the thing that is crucial to creating these truly closed loop systems? Yes, go ahead, Suraj.
When somebody is hungry, you need to give them money.
Yeah.
So if that exchange of that transaction, if it can be monitored, then technology can play one of the roles of an enabler. Now, you have to understand the larger population, there are 2% of India's population works in the collection business, that is waste collection business. Now, so I'll give you a very interesting use case. So we're working in Pondicherry with Godrej, and so we went on to buy material from our friends who are informal waste workers. Now it so happened that she said that I need cash. She came with 10 kgs of material, and she says it's 20 rupees a kg, I need 200 rupees. So we said, you know what, we are fancy people. We said, you know, can't we do UPI to you? Can we transfer it into your account? She said, no. She said, I need the money to buy my bus ticket to go home. I need the money to buy 1 kg rice to take it for my family, and that's also the money for my breakfast and my tea. Now, how do I change that?
Yep.
Now, the reality on the ground is very, very different. Yep. So, how do you create? Now, the interesting part is also when I'm just speaking about technology and the two enablers for technology as well. Now, if that is my consumer segment in which I have to digitize, what's my first step? I'll tell her that do you take credit from the market? She said, yes, I get it at 24% interest. I mean, she takes 100 rupees in the morning, and the next day she has to pay 124 rupees back. That is, we pay 24 interest annually. She pays 24 interest daily. Now, how they don't have a banking history to be able to even create qualified credit products for them so that I can have a credit history. So technology can be an enabler for during these purchase transactions where you can create a very credible, verifiable record for the entire audience that you're buying material from. Now, this is a very different use case for the waste segment. The second is an aggregator. Why would he use technology at all? What's in it for him? He's very happy putting up a loading receipt, e-way bill and fun things like that. Why does he need technology at all? What is the value proposition for him? The interesting period is when the aggregator sells material to recyclers, the credit period is 30 days. If you can fast track the payment cycle, there will be a need for them to use digital solutions because he can avail credit on that.
Yeah.
So you can't say that you can implement traceability just like that. You need to really nuancely understand the ground and understand the thought process of people and find a way to integrate technology to create traceable recyclates. And why would you even create traceable products? At the end, tomorrow, I mean, it's my dream actually, when we go to a store, there should be a story that these kind of products are for environment and these products are business as usual. Our consumer today don't have those kind of choices, right?
Yeah.
And if the consumer had that choice, is he willing to part with an additional 10 rupees? That's the question we have to answer, no? If technology pays for creating that additional 10 rupees of value, that day we have created an incredible country. And we have everything in place to do this. But I think it's coming together. And as Sir said, 5 to 10 years, we'll get there.
Yeah.
Don't you think so?
Yeah, I think.
You said 5 to 10 years.
I'm saying.
Oh, no, he's optimistic.
Very. I have to see it in my lifetime. Yeah.
But I think there's that you've touched on the role of technology, and I'm giving you a little bit of space because we're going to open this up to questions from the floor. So I hope you're thinking of all these wonderful. We're going to start a roving mic, but the role of technology. So how do you sort of touched on how do you create a win-win? So you don't pay more. You don't have to pay more for sustainability. Actually, you reduce your packaging. You make it smarter. What else can you do to actually get to that win-win marker from a packaging development perspective so that it's easier for the selection, but it also gives that benefit to society?
So, the key for us is that we produce something which can be recycled, which is today not a given. I mean, we talk about it, we talk around it, we call it recyclable, but there's not necessarily a downstream process, or it is, we need then have special recycling equipment in order to really take advantage of it. So that's our job. We need to solve that, and we need to solve it now. With regards to packaging and digitalization, there are many things which can be combined. Watermark on the pack can help with the sorting, so there's that opportunity. But also it can help, for example, with track and trace. If we can extend shelf life by 1 day, there's a lot of value to that, so we should not forget about this as well. And then counterfeiting, anti-counterfeiting is probably not the problem for a ketchup, a small ketchup sachet, but in other parts that's really important. You want to make sure that you get the real deal when you buy it, and I'm thinking about pharmaceutical packaging, etc. So there's a lot in the interface with digitization also for us. But with regards to the topic today, I think our job is to produce a product at the right performance level, which is truly recyclable, and if possible with today's streams which are already existing. And the problem there is that today the vast majority of flexible packaging is not truly recyclable, and that is our job that we need to do together with you, and then we need to make sure we really produce something which can be used downstream and then can create a value afterwards for the consumer. One thing I wanted to also quickly throw in is I used to work in waste and recycling industry in the US before, and a lot goes into landfill in the US for various reasons, but what was obvious is there is an educational element as well in terms of sorting. People who live off of that, they might be able to distinguish nylon from PET or so. But in the household, the separation, all I can tell you in my neighborhood in the US, people didn't know what to do. I hope they didn't know, and it was not really that they
Didn't care.
that they didn't care, but it was really not done the right way, and then it lands in the landfill. So that is an element I think we also have to collectively invest in education.
Thank you. So, audience, those of you online, if you want to ask us some more questions, then please do. I'm getting them through the website. But for those of us in the room, does the audience have a question for the panel? And I think we have a roving mic somewhere. And I can't see.
So Chiran really knows how to.
Yes, if you could state your name.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Dandasha. I'm the managing director of Sholay IPN. So we manufacture these aseptic bags. So aseptic bags of 200 liters. What I really like the points that we are touching upon is everyone needs to be responsible. But the biggest challenge that I see is, when I speak with Mr. A.K. Singh, I say, I want to move away from aluminium foil. Can you please, let's work on new structures for these. But the biggest challenge is with brands. Brands are not willing to compromise a little bit even on the shelf life. So even if the shelf life is, we give a shelf life, say 24 months. Can we compromise to say 18 months? Nothing doing. So I believe this is something that is important for everyone to touch base upon, because what's happening is we are unnecessary, that's what I feel, unnecessary making, we are engineering the product a bit more than what it's required.
Yogesh, so the question is, you can't have it all. Can you compromise on shelf life? Sir, would that be fair?
Keeping consumer at the center, answer is no.
So why is that important?
But I think there are ways to look at it and solve this problem as well. And of course, a lot of development needs to happen in terms of the material innovations as well. I mean, specific problem on this kind of situation is majorly with the flexible packaging. Because rigid packaging, and that's why I've taken out this. So the data says that almost even if our 90% of packaging is out of 100%, only 90% of packaging stays uncollected and goes to a landfill as well as the ocean. What does it mean? That means only 10% packaging is getting recycled globally. So this is a global data, right? So we have a big problem to solve. So what is the strategy behind it? First, make all your packaging and complex structures to recyclable first. That is the first strategy. And then we need to apply a second strategy, which is reuse and recycle. So once you solve the first problem, then second problem, automatically that will be an enabler for the whole industry. Current problem is a lot of flexible packaging are non-recyclable itself. That is a major problem. So even if I imagine 10 years from today, the data says that 50% of packaging will get collected for recycling, and mechanical recycling will be at 22% 10 years from now, and chemically recycling, which is a new technology which is going to get taking more attention in terms of technology of recycling, would be around 13%. So first problem is, and first mission of everyone is to solve that recyclability problem, and second is collection and sorting and increasing that reuse and recycling more and more.
I'm going to be a little bit challenging just because I can.
Yeah.
So what's stopping us today? Why aren't we moving faster on this? So why does it take 10 years?
Yeah, first I'll address the question that was asked. You're very right. Why do we need products today with a shelf life of, let's say, more than 12 months? This thing started when, let's say, in the late 80s or early 90s, when everything was getting converted from traditional materials like glass or metal to plastics.
Yes.
So all the polymer producers were expounding the virtues of plastics in terms of design flexibility, and people were at the same time, to meet the shelf life requirements, people were trying to match the shelf life requirements compared to glass or metal. So this is how plastics gained an entry and displacing glass and metal in the food and beverage packaging. Now what happens is today, 20 or 25 years down the line, you have e-commerce. For example, we have Swiggy. If you've been watching television, they say you can order grocery in 10 minutes, right? So why do you need, when you have fulfillment centers, which are located 20 kilometers away, and they can bring and service you your order in 15 minutes. Why do you need products with that kind of shelf life? The best example would be milk packaging structures. Milk was originally in glass in India, glass bottles. When the glass packaging shifted, the dairies adopted flexible packaging. One of the things was that it was a mono-material structure. So it has been in use. People know about it. The dairy industry has adopted. So recycling of milk packaging is standardized throughout the dairies in India. Yeah. And therefore, collection and recycling of what do you call these discarded milk pouches is a fairly well-established and efficiently run industry today. It's a short shelf-life product. The question that was asked was, what about long-term, medium-term and long-term? Yes, that is exactly my point. And in fact, we've been talking to many brand owners. They refuse to accept that products today are over-engineered. If you say that a packaging is over-engineered, brand owners and converters will flare up. Mm-hmm. They get agitated. Why? Because you have to guarantee. I mean, the consumer pressure is always on spoilage, and because anything going wrong on the shelf leading to probably spoilage of the product will be a severe impact on the brand image. And once a brand image is destroyed, it's very, very difficult to reconstruct the brand image. So you'll be almost compelled to take it out of the market unless you bring it in a different avatar. Yeah. So this is how the balancing has to be done. So probably just like in milk packaging, for a very short shelf life product, packaging structure was devised based on mono-material. Similarly, now for medium shelf life, let's say 6 to 8 months or maximum 10 months, because the downstream industry like e-commerce and organized retail is now very well positioned to deliver products at that speed. So you don't need that shelf life to meet those shelf life expectations. So you can design structures, and I think that's what Mark was also referring to when you start developing mono-material structures. So this is one step in mind. But drastically taking out aluminium because it gives you good barrier properties in terms of oxygen and light barrier, and replacing it with something which is designed for recyclability, I don't think that can happen. It has to be validated, tested in the market at a pilot level, see the consumer acceptance, see that the brand doesn't take a hit, and only then it will come into a sort of a routine commercial operation.
And perhaps that's the point then, isn't it? That you don't want sustainability to come at the cost of the safety and the hygiene of the product that you're actually protecting. And this is the challenge that Mondelez then has. But again, where is the innovation, or how do we create or incentivize those to create innovation? Is it through regulation? Is it through incentivization to start looking at what this could look like in the future? So we can cut down a little bit on some of the challenges that we're facing. Yeah.
Maybe a deep dive on the supply chain as well. Like there are multiple SKUs. Which SKUs sold fast? Maybe we can review on the shelf life of those SKUs, and that is the another way to tackle this kind of challenges.
What is an SKU for someone who's not?
Kind of let's say a particular retail consumer unit. Yeah. Yeah. So if you have 100 bucks package and 50 bucks package, so that kind of SKU variations. Okay. So if your small packages are consumed fast, there is an opportunity to check, can we relook in terms of the shelf life? What is the expectations from the consumer? How fast it is getting sold? Yeah, so those kind of things we can review.
So you're talking again as well about how important education is around what your expectation is of the package and the package use or the product. Okay, thank you. Any other question from the floor? We have one down there. There's a microphone coming your way. Yes. For those online who can't see, we have a little microphone issue. There we are. Sir,
Hi,
go ahead.
My name is Abhiraj. I'm part of the sourcing team. My question to the panel is, we see the regulations of sustainability, the EPR regulations, and it's an ever-changing system, right? So there have been many regulations that have come out very recently. The government is also trying to cope up. My question is, what does the panel see as a future for the regulatory systems in India regarding sustainability?
Okay. Yes, Suraj.
when it started, the regulatory, you have to understand the spirit of the law. When the administration, I remember this time in 2018, the Maharashtra government had banned plastics suddenly one fine day, and they called up the brand owners, the recyclers, and everybody onto a table, and it's called as the Maharashtra Plastic Task Force.
Okay.
So the intent was, nobody knew how to solve the problem because no legitimate top 100 companies are creating polythene bags under 70 micron, and which is not recyclable. So the intent of the law was to kind of create a streamlined system. Now, India is a large country with an enormous amount of non-compliance. Now, how do you structure a law that can bring so many people in the ambit? We all know if there are the top 100 companies in India will comply and will exceed the compliance. But we know that that is in principle not more than 40% of India's net product. How do you bring value to something like that? So the intent was, now when you create a policy, you want representation from every person in the value chain. The government would say, here is the responsibility of the local administration, here is the responsibility of the value chain, and here is the responsibility of the brand owner. Now, the challenge starts happening when you can't hold somebody a certain. Yeah. So, extended producer responsibility till last year was about picking material from available source and taking it to a cement kiln, period. Now, where is the source? Where do you find MLP packaging? You don't find it on the streets. You don't find it. You find it amply in the landfill. Because it would be wise to collect it, segregate it from home, but India's segregation percentage overall is not more than, 20% for a very, very exaggerated number. So where do you find the material? So it was very tricky. And that's when the government changed it on its head. They said that not only do you have to fulfill your packaging commitment, which means that amount of plastic you're placing into the environment, the brand is responsible for collecting it, but now from 2025, you might be even responsible for making 40% of your packaging recyclable, with recyclable content. Now that changes everything. So if you see India as a country in terms of the race to create recyclable content or recyclates or is introduction of recyclable content in packaging is in principle only 12 months old. And the questions that are here in this audience are very, very tricky questions, because 12 months to undo 70 years of engineering is going to take some while because it has to be tested. And that the government, I believe, also recognizes. But, in India, it works in either it's a reward or it's a stick, right? So I think it started with the stick from a policy and now everybody is doing their best to kind of do that. Now, the second aspect of this also is that government, in principle, does not know the recycling capability of India. Now, India, quantity of recycling, no problem. India recycles amply. Now, if you mention quality of recycling, that's when the challenge starts coming. Because a significant supply side cannot be used to fulfill the EPR compliance is because they will not meet the brand standards. Now, the question is here is that when you are having, you asked a question, what's stopping recycling? Yeah. It's precisely the EPR policies, because you can have a fancy car, but if you don't have an engine to apply your brakes, then there's nobody to enforce it. Unless very significant enforcement happens of the EPR law for the next 5 years, I think the momentum the country has got will be lost. The top 100 companies will do a fabulous job, but that will only solve less than 30-40% of the problem. India still will be a dirty country. I think if the 100 brand owners invest, there will be 10 recyclers, institutional recyclers, you'll invest into them. Just let's do the mathematics to this, okay? It's fun because it'll help the policy work better as well. If 10 recyclers, each of them invest 100 ton per day recycling capacity of near virgin advanced capacity. That in principle, 20 recyclers, 2,000 tons per day capability. That is still in the ballpark of 8 lakh tons per annum, which is shy of 1 million. India produces 16.5 million metric tons of plastic packaging. That's less than 6%. The time taken from production to commercialization of a recycling plant would take in the ballpark of 24 to 36 months. So for 36 months, you're not having exceeded capacity of even 6%. So when Sir says 10 years, it's legit, It will not solve the problem, but if we have a compounded increase, we will eventually get to close to 45 to 50% of the problem, which is not bad, because we'll be not doing suboptimal recycling, but we're also doing 50% of great recycling. And that's when the EPR law, the spirit of the law will be enacted, and that's 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr.
One of the
Yes,
one of
thank
the
you.
one of the roadblocks over the last couple of years has been, I was a part of Reliance Industries Limited for a decade. I worked in the Product Application Research Center. So as a responsible raw material supplier, one of the things was that whenever we advocated applications, we also taught our customers how to recycle it. But probably the quantum of waste that was getting generated during that decade was not significant to attract attention. Only when the problem went out of hand, and you have this, all kinds of practices, nefarious practices like those jabla bags and carry bags, which went to atrociously low values like 10 microns, 5 microns, 8 microns. And when those started floating in the environment, creating an eyesore, that is when the government woke up and with a stick said, please have a solution. Then it almost took 10 to 15 years. No solution was coming. Then again, when this worldwide this problem got highlighted with the United Nations report coming in, then they said, if you don't have a solution, what we know and what we understand is we'll ban it. During the implementation of those regulations, or let's say regulatory framework, there was a lot of misconceptions regarding the definition of single-use plastics. So now we are at a stage where we have clearly understood what is the definition of a single-use plastics and what are those products which can be taken off from manufacturing so that it need not come into the environment. So far, food packaging has been left out. So plastics will still be the predominant material. And as many of the brand owners and the raw material suppliers have been working, they will devise structures in such a way that they can be put into the recycling stream. Today, we also talk about biodegradable or compostable materials. But today, till now, nowhere in the world we have established these kind of are truly biodegradable or compostable. And there's so much of confusion in the literature that you see, home composting, industrial composting. So all that boils down to is, let's say from a brand owner's perspective, I have a sachet, shampoo or any other ketchup, which costs 2 rupees or 5 rupees. Now, if I want to make it, say, environmentally sustainable, I make it from a so-called biodegradable material. The cost goes up 20 times. You as a consumer will not pay for it because still there is no infrastructure in place which will take care of the composting. So, and then there are other issues, what is the level of degradation, where is the land available for all this? Yeah.
I know you have a question. We are 2 minutes to ending it for the live stream. So if I may, I'd like just for all of you to comment, if I could be a fairy, as it were, and grant you a wish in terms of what needs to happen, can you give me in very short sentence? Then we'll let go of our online streaming audience, and then we'll stay here and answer a couple more questions for those in the audience and let you ask yours. So very, very shortly, what is the one thing that we need to make sure that we do have these recycling schemes?
I think collaboration is the key word.
Okay.
That's the key word. It cannot, as the others have also said, it cannot be a single owner-driven. It has to be a collaborative effort because all of us are part, including the consumers.
Okay, thank you. Yogesh.
I think so. Reduce, recycle, and reuse. That we have to do more and more and ensure the loop is closed.
Good. Marco?
Well, I take it personal. I think we need to get to truly recyclable packaging 100%.
Okay. Suraj?
I really feel that collection and aggregation of material needs to also come at the same quality of conversation like recycling. Otherwise, we will not have material but a lot of capacity. Yeah.
Thank you. So for those of you watching us online, thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you at the next Think Circle. Goodbye, and thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're offline.